Hmm. This could be an interesting one. So, hi. uh, what do we got here? Let's catch everybody else up before we get on the topic. So, last Saturday I went down to Portland. There's a little YouTuber meetup thing at at this kind of small but uh older pet shop. It's been there for a while. I'm not sure when they first opened, but like uh the person who's kind of, if you're in the Northwest, you probably know him, John Manro, not Joe. Jeez, brain no function. He had worked there back in like the 70s, right? So it's been around since at least the 70s. Uh, but Daniken Aquatics, Kenny, good to see you, buddy. Uh, was there. A couple others of us were all there. Boots and Cats and Boots and Cats and Boots and Cats was there. I know I'm forgetting some folks, and I feel bad because I know them by their faces and names, and not necessarily their YouTube IDs. It is kind of terrible, but good at the same time because I think it's better that I know who they actually are. I don't know. Anyway, so braved the ice storm because for those that don't know, the Pacific Northwest got hit with a bit of snow and ice. Portland especially got hit pretty hard, and we have like no infrastructure. Cora Works was there, but we have like no infrastructure to deal with it. Like most of there are very few like plowing trucks and things like that places that regularly get snow and ice have that infrastructure, right? We don't, because it's so irregular and we usually don't get much in depth. So like the parking lot, now the major street that they're off of, that was relatively clean, pretty easy to navigate. Freeways were fine, right? My drive down there was easy peasy, but because it's cold, it just took longer because electric cars and cold and no so great, right? But the parking lot in their hand was like an ice field. So it was a little dangerous navigating the parking lot, but then you get inside, nice warm aquarium store. It's a store called Kay's Aquarium. I think their sign just says Kay's Pets. If you're ever going down that area, it's on Division Street. It's the east side, so Northeast Division, because I guess there's also Northwest Division, right? But yeah, it's kind of a skating rink. We were all being like super careful whenever we had to actually get toward the parking lot and go to cars. But it was really fun. Kenny live streamed from there for a little bit. It was good to see a lot of folks. Because of the weather, a lot less people showed up than have showed up previously when this has been done. But that kind of made it more fun. I got to sit and talk with the owners, which was really cool. So it was just fun. It was a fun thing, and I picked up some medications while I was there just to have. I like having Canaplex just kind of available. So Kanamycin. And they had like the big thing of it because unfortunately my local store usually only carries the little tubes, and you guys have seen my video ranting about how much I hate those little tubes. So at least getting the bigger thing that's easier to scoop out of was kind of nice, even if it's still the same tiny, terrible scoop. But yeah, whatever. uh, Okay, Leo209 will answer this question real fast, and then we'll get into the topic. What would you consider to be the big difference in water? TDS in your high 200 to low 300, or old water high 400s? But I'm kind of confused, but I think I know what you mean. So basically, what's happening is your water is aging, you're building up mineral content. Usually, usually, this is nitrogen levels elevating over time. So you could like test your water as an example, and you'd probably see that younger water that's that 2 to 300 TDS is probably showing like 0, maybe 10 parts per million nitrates. Where if you were to test that older water, you're probably seeing an elevated level of nitrates because your system is just processing ammonia and nitrite and turning it into nitrates, that aerobic bacteria cycle that we expect, right, in the nitrogen cycle. And usually what you're dealing is some elevated level. So yeah, that's like all right. So, speaking of, yeah, Pacific Northwest Aqua was there. Thank you. I just know Ryan is like, a member of the Portland club. I forget sometimes that he does YouTube too. Uh, it was weird not having probably the person I would have expected to travel there, which is my friend Alex Fishery, but understandable given the weather, and I think he had something going on or whatever. But he gave a little shout out, which was cool. But yeah, let's get into the topic. So I want to walk you guys through. I guess you would say an exercise about a way that you could consider trying to pick an aquarium convention if you're deciding to go to one. Now, for some people, like Paul Soltero, they'll go to a couple a year. There's a number of folks who maybe are in the replay crew or whatever that go to a lot of conventions, and I kind of envy you, and kind of don't at the same time. That's a lot of travel. I'm not a big traveler type person. Aquarium Domain has said that it's easy. You just go to Keystone Clash. A little bit of favoritism there, just a little bit. But I want to walk you through kind of a process. I think there's kind of 3, maybe 4 ways. Let's just say 3 for right now. That I would look at as the ways I would determine which of the many conventions are out there, whether it's Aquashella, whether it's Fishtoberfest, whether it's Aquarama, whether it's... We got to work on that name, Kenny. Aquashella, of course, is the big one. Keystone Clash. The various association things, so like the ALA, the American Killifish Association, the ACA, all their bigger events, Cataclysm. And then there's also some of the big events that are close to conventions, but maybe not a convention, but we'll kind of lump them in. Think of this like the Greater Chicago Cichlid Association swaps of the GCCA. My mouth for a second was like, we don't want to pronounce that. I'd fight through that bad boy. Or like the Quad City swap would be another example of something that's like, it's a huge event. It's so huge, you might as well lump it in with conventions. But it is just like a giant swap as opposed to a convention where you have speakers. So maybe that's the first thing you would want to ask yourself, other than YouTube trying to harass me to throw commercials. No, YouTube, how dare you? Is, what's the part of the convention that matters the most, right? Is it speaker lineups? Is it just, I want a big convention and I want or maybe I just want the social hangout. Maybe I just want to go meet some of my favorite people in chat. I want to go sit and talk with Dee Dee from Dee Dee's Fin Den, right? I want to meet Leo if Leo's going to be out there, whatever the heck it may be, right? I want to go meet Aquarium Domain. You're going to have to go to Keystone Clash for that one. Whatever that may be. You first kind of want to determine that, because if speakers don't matter to you, well, then you can start looking at those things like the big swaps, Quad City Swap, GCCA, or maybe there is, the speakers don't matter, but the overall topic of the event matters more. So something like the AGA or the ALA, right? Those things that are more specific to certain types of fish and or plants, whatever that may be. For me, I look at it like this. I think there's kind of 3 categories that I look at. Location. Am I going to focus on location first? So as an example, if there's an event in Portland or Washington, I go to it because it's easy for me to get to. It's a short drive, usually in the grand scheme, short drive, big quotation marks, but in the grand scheme of things, they're all short drives. If it's something I can easily do in a few hours, I go to pretty much any event like that whenever possible, right? And so it might be one of those things where, like, maybe you're like me, you don't like to travel a whole lot for whatever reason it may be. You might not have the same reason I do, but you might have the same reason I do. Who knows? And maybe traveling is not your thing. So maybe it's one of those things where maybe the cost of flying and doing hotels and things like that is a little too much. So you need events that are close. So location is kind of the first thing I would look at. But if that doesn't matter to you, like you're going to do maybe one convention a year, kind of like how I do it, I kind of choose one traveling convention, and then it doesn't matter where it is, within reason, because I expect to fly and have a hotel and things like that. So then I think the second thing that you would look at is what's more important to you, the specificity of the convention or the size of the convention. And let me give you an example. Keystone Clash isn't really like specific to one thing. Aquashella is not specific to one thing. But they're both a certain size, right? Aquashella is probably the biggest one. Keystone Clash is getting pretty big, which is awesome. But it's not Aquashella size, right? You know, we're not talking like 4,000 or 5,000 people going to this thing. We're talking, 1,000 maybe. Or does that specificity matter? Maybe you are a live bearer nerd, right? You only keep live bearers. Live bearers are your jam. So going to a convention that is only about cichlids might not be interesting to you, but going to a live bearer convention where you could have some of those experts or maybe vendors that have rare live bearers that you've been trying to find and you've struggled to find, you're more likely to find them at the live bearer convention than you are at, say, like that rainbow fish convention where those other weirdos get together, right? Something like that. Scotty the Fish Freak. Someone said Keystone Clash. I did. What's up, Scotty? The last thing I would look at is kind of similar, but I feel like it's different. Are you going there because of the speakers? And that's kind of in that specificity role, right? Because usually you're getting an expert on something special for you, but you might not care about all the speakers. You might only care about one. And it could be very similar to this, is what if your goal is to go see dum-dums on the internet? Maybe you want to go to a convention to meet someone like KG Tropicals. You want to meet Aquarium Domain. You want to meet Aquarium Co-op, right? Some of the folks that travel to some of these conventions. You want to meet Primetime Aquatics. I got to meet Jason from Primetime Aquatics at Keystone Clash. It was fantastic. So that's where some of the speakers for the conventions that do use some of us YouTubers. Puppy, can you try not to get into trouble behind me while I'm streaming? Thank you. She knows. She's like, he's distracted. Now's the time to get into the stuff I'm not supposed to. Yeah, sit in your chair. That's good. Dogs. What do you do, right? But it might be that, like, that social side of things. Maybe there is a group of people that you regularly interact with in chat or in comments, people that you've met online that you want to be able to hang out with in person. And you know that that whole group is going to go to Aquashella Dallas. Well, then there's inherently a higher level of interest to go to Aquashella Dallas because the people that you want to hang out with, the social part of it, is there. For me, I look at one of two things. I usually look at, is it something I haven't been to before? Because I like going and kind of getting that new experience to compare it to some of my other experiences. Not everybody cares about that. Not everybody's kind of like checking off conventions on their list. But often what I will look for is, are there a set of people, and now this is a little biased because I'm on the creator side, right? But are there a set of people that I regularly see in the comments, in chat, whatever that may be, that I know are going to a specific convention and I either haven't met them before or it's been more than a year since I've seen them? That increases my desire to go to a specific convention. So this is a great example. Other than the fact that Scotty got crazy and decided he wanted to ask me to be a speaker at last year's Keystone Clash, there are a couple of people I know that go to Keystone Clash that don't go to a lot of the other conventions, and the biggest one was Rico Stan. And Rico is somebody who, from times interacting in chat, being interviewed on his channel and things like that, he's somebody who I always wanted to go and just sit down and talk with. He was going to Keystone Clash. Had I not been invited to speak, I probably still would have highly considered Keystone Clash because of the people being there. Primetime Aquatics was a really good one. I didn't know Jeremy from Aquarium Domain was going to be there, but now I do, and that's a strong selling point because he's a good dude. What's up, buddy? But things like that I think matter. And yes, I'm actively petting the dog to make sure she'll stay good. For Legion, because you were asking, she's doing great. She's fully healed at this point. I've seen her do all the things that she used to do before she injured her hip and head surgery. Um, and she does crazy, crazy nonsense. So she's pretty much fully back to normal. You really can't even tell. You have to like literally kind of dig her fur to see where her scar is from surgery because it doesn't show up in her fur or anything like that. So she's doing great. So the question comes down to this, right? For you, chat, this is where I want to hear from you. For you, is it location that matters? Is it like specificity? There is one person who's very strongly saying, Roger, I'm with you here. The auction matters for certain people. And I think that kind of ties into specificity a little bit because you might know that, like, hey, I know that a lot of really good keepers of X type of fish are going to go to this convention. And that's where their auction items are going to be. So that might make you want to go there, right? And I think that's cool. Legion Aquatics, the ideal convention meeting would have LRB, Bentley, and Jason from Primetime. Well, we're only missing one from last year Keystone Clash. You're only missing LRB, but that would have been interesting. Lucas is a hoot. But man, I will say this for those of you. For those of you in chat, obviously, like, I would love to sit down with all of you and be able to sit down and just BS. If you do get an opportunity to go to a convention and sit down and talk with Jason from Primetime Aquatics, do so. Because Jason is a stellar human being. He's so fun to just sit and babble with. And we had huge groups of people sitting at tables just talking. And he was always really, really fun to chat with. All sorts of fish-related and non-fish-related stuff. Just very fun to talk to. So that's the kind of thing I would look at is like, does location matter? Because for some people, maybe you don't like to fly, and that limits you because driving is only so far. Now, if you're on the East Coast, a lot more options for you than, say, us poor folks on the West Coast over here. But, then you might look at, is there a specific speaker or maybe a set of, or maybe it's only one YouTuber that you want to go be able to meet in person and talk to. And keep in mind that if that YouTuber is going to multiple conventions, you might try to pick the smaller convention because you're more likely to get more time to talk to that person than at a big convention. And that's why, for as much as like I've had a number of people tell me like I need to go to an Aquashella, which at some point I plan to. I don't know if I'm going to do it this year. I'm trying to figure that out. This year might be weird for travel. I might not be able to travel to anything this year, depending on how stuff shakes out here soon. But had some fun stuff that has made certain things troublesome. Let's put it that way. Dog surgeries, things like that. Time not working last year messed with all your fun money, cushion money, whatever. But it'll depend. YouTube does YouTube things, and in the end, I think I technically can write them off of my taxes if I go to one. Right? I don't know. Who cares? You guys don't care about that part. But I would say, like, if you go to Aquashella and you're trying to talk to, say, Corey from Aquarium Co-op, right? Or maybe you want to talk to Jason Primetime Aquatics. Any of these channels that have a fairly large following. If you're at a convention that has 5,000 people, there's significantly more people that are probably going to try and talk to those same people, like someone like Lucas from LRB, right? So it's going to be harder to get more than maybe like a minute with that person, right? Because the demand is higher. But if they happen to go to, say, like, well, I know they're also going to be at the ALA convention, and I happen to like live bearers, and that convention's smaller, that might be a better opportunity to talk with that person that you want to talk to. Now, if you don't care about that, maybe it's a speaker. Maybe you want to go see a presentation from Gary Lang. You're like a rainbow psycho like me, and you'll go to basically almost anything where Gary Lang's talking if you can make it happen. Then find the speaker. Kelly, if you aren't writing off your entire hobby with an LLC, we need to talk. Yeah, I probably could be doing things better. I'm not the best tax person. What do you want from me? I'm simple. I'm not an LLC. I should be, though. I know from a tax perspective I should be. But I don't make that much, so I don't care. All right. Anyway, we'll get off of that. I don't we don't need that conversation on the live stream. So that's kind of my thing. Passing when Keystone Clash should be held in London. I mean, I'm sure that would be interesting if Scotty could like pull the strings and make Keystone international. That'd be pretty dope. I will say this: I personally prefer slightly smaller conventions because I like the opportunity to spend more time talking to folks like you. For me, with the exception of the Triple Crown, because there was a bunch of just really good Rainbow Fish speakers, and I even skipped some of them that I shouldn't have. I cared more about the people going necessarily than the speakers, even though the speakers were people I liked listening to or wanted to hear talk. Marcel was an example. Johannes Graf, I wanted to see him give a presentation. Gary, of course, I'll watch Gary do the same presentation over and over again because Gary is just entertaining as all heck for me. But what was more important in the things that are strong in my head, yeah, okay, yeah, I get you. I passing when I get the Clash reference, but let's think simple here. Sometimes the brain's fried when you've been working like 60 hours a week. All right. um, for me, like I care so much about the social atmosphere and getting to meet folks like you, and that's kind of the I guess luxury of being on the creator side is that I babble about fish probably too much as is and consume so much fish content as is that the thing that is the most fun for me is getting to sit down with somebody like if I could sit down with Johnny from Dance Fish or Rico Stan and we could just talk about anything. It isn't always necessarily fish, although that's very common, right? When I sat and got to meet Jeremy and get to know him, and now like man, I love that guy to death. But we just sat and babbled about all sorts of stuff. And my initial perception from having watched a limited amount of his videos and having really only caught up on like his 4,500 gallon series most recently was like I'd kind of forgot that like he had a big saltwater tank and that he had a tank with rainbow fish in it entirely. Like I just forgot because I'm a dum dum. Then we started talking and he reminded me and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm an idiot. I should know this. I know I've watched that video. Now I've got to go back and watch it again to remind myself, to remember in my head. But getting to understand that like how some of these people view other things or like talking to someone that is like I loved this one thing and because I watched this one thing it took me down this entire rabbit hole because like I'm like that, right? I watched one tour of Gary Lang's house and then I went from like I'm gonna keep tetras and danios and all my small schoolers to like I'm gonna keep rainbow fish in like every tank and I'm not going to carry very many small fish because I've gotten psychotically obsessed with these fish, right? Like how many other people have a story like that but for something completely different and getting to hear people's stories and why they love fish or they got into fish, maybe some of their other hobbies alongside fish. Those are the things that I love the most at conventions. So when I go to a convention, I like talking to folks like you or sitting down with Kelly Foreman, right? Who I've talked primarily through chat in text, and we give each other sass, and it's great. But getting to sit down and really talk about why we love things, and I think thankfully, like maybe the best conversation we had but didn't have was we were on a panel chat together talking about rainbow fish, and we got to just talk back and forth this Q&A environment with a crowd, and it's this bigger, larger conversation with everybody present. But we're all kind of having fun and engaged. But at the same time, I'm getting to understand like certain fish that Kelly has an appreciation for, even on our narrow niche of the hobby, right? That I also have a massive appreciation for that might not be like the popular children in the room, so to speak. Things like that. Getting to hang out with like someone like Dan from Dan's Fish. Johnny, you have a point. Skip the conventions. Come to the 4th of July barbecue at the warehouse. Okay, so we'll get into questions at this point. So at Bentley Pasco makes it super easy for me to see. If you have a question you want me to answer, make sure you do at Bentley Pasco in your comments in the chat. Replay crew, of course, just ask your question in the comments, and I'll do my best to answer them. But I was talking with Kenny, and Kenny, if you're still listening, you'll probably laugh at this. Uh, we're talking to Kenny, and he was like, "Oh yeah, dude, I can. If you really want to go out to Dan's Fish for the barbecue, just let me know. It's like only a 16-hour drive if I'm driving. I'll just come pick you up and we can go." And I was like, "That's oddly tempting because for me, right? I just getting to sit in a car with a friend and babble like the idiots we are on a road trip to a barbecue at Dan's does sound very fun. Does sound very fun. I won't lie." And I haven't decided which convention I'm going to this year yet, so who knows where I'm going to go. You guys will know. I'll announce it as soon as I figure that out. If I'm going somewhere, though. Okay, here we go. Aquaria Works. Jordan fell in love with Furcata rainbows after you pointed them out at K's, so now they're on the short list. Okay, yeah. So at K's, I really should have like used my cell phone and at least got some video of that particular tank because it is really cool. But they have this beautiful planted display tank, and they had a big. I mean, he had to be about this big, full adult, massive Furcata male. It was just flying all over the place, fully lit up, pom pom in his fins and everything. And that little dude was putting on a show. It was jolting around, and we were trying to like figure out every kind of fish that was in this mixed, cool display tank that they had, and it was kind of fun because like when of course I see a rainbow fish and I'm like, yes, I am really paying attention now. But it was kind of fun. It was one of those tanks where like you could watch it for 10 minutes and then look away, and 20 minutes later you'd see something you didn't see before. And I love those tanks. They're super fun. Yeah, Furcatas are great. Furcatas are a great fish. They're probably my second favorite Pseudomcgill. My number one is the Cyanodorsalis, but that's a brackish and or saltwater fish. Elfish tanks. If Dan would roast a pig, I'd consider going. Define roast a pig. Because what if it's like, whole hog barbecue versus like the in-ground roast, like Hawaiian style? What are we talking here? Oh, man. Oh, man. Nabokov fan. Have you ever had a rainbow with fin rot? Ever? Rainbow with fin rot? I can't say I've ever seen fin rot on a rainbow. Kelly, have you ever seen fin rot on a rainbow? I don't think I have. I'm trying to think really hard. I've had columnaris. I've had stupid calamanus worms. I've had a few other like bacterial infections that I couldn't identify, but I don't think I've ever seen fin rot. I've had a betta with fin rot before, but I don't think I've ever seen fin rot in a. That's interesting because now it makes me wonder if it's just something they're naturally kind of immune is not the right word, but highly resistant to. Huh. Interesting one. I bet if we polled the greater audience, like someone like Gary Lang probably has eventually seen it, but interesting. Someday I will have Cyanodorsalis in a macroalgae tank. Yeah, it's kind of the same thing that I'm thinking, is I want to do a macroalgae aquascape with Cyanodorsalis at some point in the future. But that's long from now. Are you feeling human yet, Johnny? Good to see that he is. He's feeling better. It's Dan on a grill with hot dogs and hamburgers. Definitely not really a barbecue. Oh, we can fix that. If there is fire, I am good at cooking meat on fire. We can fix these problems. I can't guarantee like a whole pig roast though. I've never done that. So you gotta bring like some steaks or something. Come on, man. Kebabs maybe. Mega champ. Let's go, champ. Good to see you. What is your opinion on Saurolites? Well, that should, by the fact that I question that heavily, that should tell you I have not used them before. Let me go look at these things. Uh-oh. This is looking oddly familiar, like the Can I Buy a Vowel style product, as my friend Rob Olson from the Aquarium Guys podcast likes to call him. So this looks really similar to Honestly, kind of the same light that we've seen from like JC&P and a lot of other places, which is to say just a Chinese manufactured light with some small difference to it than maybe some of the other ones that are out there. I would guess it performs very similar to a lot of the other, relatively economically friendly Chinese lights, where after time you're going to get some dimming, but don't drop it in the water, and for its price, it's probably okay. I probably wouldn't expect it to grow like super high light plants. Maybe medium to low would be the best guess, but I've never used one, so I can't give you a really good opinion on it. I can give you some rough guesstimates. Leo29, our new water is because we went from river water instead of well water. Got you. Um, I mean, I wouldn't stress that difference is not hard for your fish to adjust to, right? They'll adjust to that difference. That's not a huge enough difference to where they would struggle to adjust. The only thing that could be a little more interesting is depending on time of year, because it's river versus well, you might see larger fluctuations in that TDS. So, like in the summer, it might be significantly lower as the river water runs a little thinner, so your TDS might increase. And then during the winter, even though you're in California, so it's not like you get heavy rains like the Northwest does, but in winter you're going to have a little bit more water. It might be slightly more diluted, so you might have a little more seasonal change in your water than you would necessarily from a well. But probably unlikely given that you're in California. So, yeah, I wouldn't stress too much about it. Kingfisher Sketch. If you could get one fish from Greg Sage, what would it be? Oh, I don't even have to think hard about that. That's the Yucatan Molly, the big sailfin Molly, the one that gets like this. No, I mean they get like 5 inches. They get big, and they get that just that the males get that huge like mohawk sailfin on them. I love those fish. They're so cool. You definitely want a big tank for them because of how big they get, and they are a live bearer, and you don't want too many males in your colony from all the research I've done and also talking to Greg. But that's absolutely the one fish that I would want, even though I don't think he actively sells it anymore. He was having some trouble with his colony. Excuse? You don't need to bark. She's trying to protect me from nothing. It's great. It's probably like brother-in-law James going to the bathroom or something. She's like, I heard a noise, bark. But yeah, that would be the one. For you, it's a toss-up between the Odessas and the Gadeids. He has the best Odessa barbs, period. The color on his Odessa barbs is so much more intense than any other Odessa barb that I've seen out there, unless it was someone else who also got their stock from Greg Sage. So I would go with Odessa, given those choices. But there is like the, was it tricolor Gadeid? I can't remember the scientific name, but that one's really cool. And so are trout Gadeids. I like trout Gadeids in general. If I ever keep a Gadeid, it will probably be the trout Gadeid. But yeah, those Odessas are just too good. But for me, Yucatan sailfin Molly. I will eventually have that fish, even though I've heard it's finicky. But I'll give it a try. I like rolling those dice. Pulsatero, it's Wyoming, so it's barbecued bison. I mean, I've had bison before, and it was good. It was a burger, though, so it's not like it's anything crazy, but it was good. Aquatic Moose picked up the Tiger version of the Python per your suggestion. It does leak a bit at the faucet, but I figured that's probably part of the whole thing. Yeah, I think it's because, at least with the plastic fittings, I've heard that they have a newer version or maybe an upgrade that allows you to get metal fittings. That's a little bit better. But I've actually... So I went back to a regular Python recently because my tube was just like going nuts in the Higer, and I could not, even with some reasonable like running hot water through it to get it pliable and loose and like straightening it out as best as I could and letting it untangle itself, I could not prevent it from kinking really hard in like 2 spots, to where I got to a point of where I had to have either my wife or brother-in-law James sit there holding the tube open, and they're relatively close to each other, so they'd have to pull it out to, like this, basically like larger than my camera can capture, and hold it the whole time so that I could do water changes. And I probably could have just replaced the tube, but laziness and Amazon work really well together. So I just bought a python because they do have a slightly larger, better bit of vinyl tubing that comes with them naturally. But I do prefer the actual like suction tube that's on the Higer. So like the actual end, the elongate. I like how long the end is for that one. Even though it can be kind of a bear in my particular racks, it just gives me so much more depth that I can drop it to and control it without putting my arm in the tank like I do with the Python. But whatever. They all work. It's just if you want to save some money, go with the Higer. It works great. Works great. Legion Aquatics. Pro tip: if you're ever talking to Bentley at a convention and he looks like he's getting bored, just say rainbow fish. I don't know why I find that as funny as I do, but I do. Uh, I try. Usually, if I look like I'm getting bored, it's because I'm like running on fumes and I'm getting tired. Because I don't sleep very much when I go to conventions, and even when I try to force myself to get extra sleep, so that I'm like not in the middle of the day going, right? You know how it is. You get tired, you start nodding off, and then you try to look like you're not nodding off, so nobody catches on. Oh Lord. Jacob Metzner has better Odessa barbs per Johnny at Dan's Fish. All right. But I don't know Jacob Metzner, so I might, but I don't know his Odessa barbs off the top of my head. I just know Greg's, and I know multiple people with them, and they're always something where I get in there and I'm like, those are Greg's barbs, aren't they? And they're always like, yeah. I'm like, I can tell by the color compared to like a normal store barb, right? But yeah, Greg's got tons of great fish. I like Greg Sage. This is why you get paid the big bucks, Bentley. I don't know about that. I get paid mediocre bucks. But I guess for my profession, I do pretty well. Aquatic Moose Meat on Fire would be a good band name. It's gotta be somewhere, right? Okay, I'm gonna try and catch up, make sure I'm not too far behind. Only way, have you ever considered building an automatic water change system for the fish room? I want to do one in my garage. I don't want to do one internal to my actual house. Um, Mostly because of trying to get that all plumbed up correctly in my house would be a little bit of a nightmare with just how my house is designed, where certain things are, etc., etc. But in whenever I get to do my proper fish room in my garage, it'll all be automatic water change. I actually like certain levels of automation. So, as an example, automatic water change, big fan. Having a dehumidifying system that auto drains itself, or an air exchanger would be my personal choice. Love it, right? Because that way I don't have to worry about humidity getting too high. I can regulate temperature better. I have water changes regularly at a pace I don't have to worry about them. These are all great. The one thing I will never do, I will never automate feeding of my fish. And I probably also won't automate feeding on my plants. Because for me, one of the things that kind of forces me to pay attention to what's going on with my fish, and this is just a built in habit to kind of constantly look at the health of my fish, is when I feed them and when I fertilize my plants, I look at my plants. Because I can kind of constantly adjust things that I need to make sure that everything is going okay. Plus, it gives me that interaction. Like as an example, right? I recently got some brand new young rainbows in one of my tanks, and they've been super shy, but they're starting to get more used to when I come in the room. Probably means you're getting food, so they're a little less shy, and it's getting better and better. And so they're starting to show color and all that good stuff. Even though they're young juveniles, they're about yay big, but they got color. That's fun for me. So it helps me, right, get used to their behavior, observe their health. Because if they were constantly hiding because of some other stressor and I was automatically feeding them, I might not ever know that, right? But because I go in and I feed and I deal with my plant stuff and, of course, filter maintenance when that needs to happen, I pay more attention that way. But like automatic water changes, easy peasy. I automatically feed my fish when I walk in the room. Hector, that's a good one, Hector. Oh man, speaking of Hector, I got to pretty soon put up my new review for your powdered fertilizer, your everything, if you will. Uh, spoiler alert, I like it. Significant improvement from the previous version. So give us some love. I do got to. At some point, I'll ever have to like have you text me or something through Luke or email because I do have to ask you like one small question. But that's just to send people the right direction if they want to try it to pick it up. Leo209, thanks for the $4.99 super chat, buddy. I wonder how this river water is going to affect my plants. I guess my regulator was loose, so that's why CO2 was escaping. Good job, I lost some CO2. Yeah, but you know what? It's better to kind of figure out that you have a loose portion of your regulator than it is to find out you're like overgassing a tank. So I would be a little less stressed on that one. As far as the river water, I would definitely make sure you do a bunch of testing, right? Just kind of keep testing it and test it throughout the year so you can see if there are like little seasonal swings in your water conditions. And I would say to do that to anybody, throughout even me, I'm on city water, but I've done enough testing and paid enough attention that I know that like there's a small difference in TDS in the summer, but there's also a couple times a year where they like clean out our pipes, and that can sometimes cause big algae outbreaks at my house. Thankfully, when I called and complained to the water company, they put me on a special persons list, and they do an extra special clean out at my place, trying to basically flush everything with before it goes to my house, which is nice. Yeah. If you get a chance, you got a water company, like call them and talk to them about how you have tens of thousands of dollars, even if you don't, of aquarium fish, and maybe just maybe they'll do the same thing that my water company does, which is where a couple times a year they send a guy out to just sit there and flush your pipes out into the local storm drain to make sure that something bad doesn't get into your fish tanks and they don't get sued. Cheat the system, man. Cheat the system. So, Flow Cichlids, I have a super soft tap water. It's basically RO. Is it okay to chase parameters in this instance? Once added to my tank, it drops to 6 to 6.2 and my plants suffer. So, yes. This is so like I have similar water in the sense that there's very little in my water. It is a little bit basic, which means that its pH comes out of the tap somewhere between 7.2 and 7.4. It's hard to get perfect testing with most of the kits out there without getting something very, very expensive to test it. But it's very soft. There's like anywhere between 26 and 32 TDS out of the tap. Almost nothing in my water. And that includes the small amount of chlorine that's in there, right? So for me, if I don't use something like crushed coral to buffer, or you could use other things, like you could use all sorts of different like salts and things like that. That pH just crashes right after a certain period of time, and it's not long. It can be within a week. Sometimes it's longer, but the thing is, I like using something that is constant, so I'm not adding it every time I do water changes. Although there are products out there that help do that for you if you're trying to target a really specific number, instead of someone like me who's just like, I use a chunk of crushed coral, I put it in my tank, and I just monitor how much crushed coral is left, and it tells me whether I need to refresh it or not. And I've kind of gotten used to the point of where like a handful about this big in a small mesh bag is good in a 40-gallon for like 6 months. Where if I'm trying to do, say, 120-gallon tank, I probably only get that to last maybe, and assuming that's in the filter and not just in the tank itself, that's only going to last 2 to 3 months, right? Just because it's significantly more water that's moving through it and absorbing all the calcium that's in there to buffer that water's hardness up, etc., etc. So the question for you, SoFlo, would be, do you want to go hyper-targeted? I want to hit exactly like 5 degrees of GH and KH, or do you just want to make sure that it's buffered enough so you don't deal with a crash? If it's buffered enough to make sure you don't deal with a crash, you could look at some like crushed coral, oyster shell, some amounts of aragonite sand. There's lots of options. And a small mesh bag in your filter does a really good job of kind of maintaining that for you. And when you're doing your filter maintenance, you just monitor it and see whether or not you need to put new ones in, right? If you're looking for that hyper targeted, then you could look at something like Seachem's Equilibrium, Salty Shrimp, any of those other like GH and KH buffers that help add that mineral and salt content in to get you to a certain point. And then you do very measured doses, and it's not very hard once you get used to it. You do it once or twice, and you just kind of got it down, right? But yeah, that would be the route I would take. Leo29, crazy thing is my cousin, who lives in the same city, his water is softer than mine. That's interesting. I will say, like, where I live, some people are on one water company, and some people are on a different water company. And even though all those water companies source their original water basically from the same source that all of Seattle uses, they do their own kind of like voodoo witchcraft, if you will, for their pipes. So they do have differences in the water, even though like we're in the same city. It's interesting. But you know, what do you do? I'm thinking of using salty shrimp, GH, KH. Do you just leave the coral in the tank hidden? Yeah, so I usually have mine, and sometimes I put it just in the substrate and don't care. It depends on my tank. Like if I'm using a lot of, say, sponge filters as an example, I don't really have a place to hide it. But if I do have a powered filter, then I create like a small mesh bag of fine mesh that after I've rinsed it and everything, I just put it inside the filter. So that as the water is moving through, it's naturally sort of soaking up some of that stuff and buffering for me. You can also use Hector's Everything, which comes with basically a calcium and magnesium buffer built into the rest of the fertilizers because it's a powdered fertilizer, and you can do that kind of voodoo witchcraft with that as opposed to making it as efficient with a liquid. It's not very efficient liquid-wise. But a powdered fertilizer like Hector's will do that for you, which is one of the other benefits in there is that he basically has your water treatment. So like if you were using Seachem Safe or Ultimate or this one, Fritz Complete, etc., it's got that, plus some of your mineralization, plus all the stuff your plants need in one go in a powder. It's kind of a everything, if you will. Vague advertisement there, but I'll be doing a video on that one relatively soon because I've been testing it for a few months now. I'm basically out of mud I had because I used it so much, but now that I've kind of completed all of my testing, I can talk about what I like, think about it, and the positives, and the like almost no negatives. The negative is very tiny. It's not really a negative. It's kind of like I'm griping, I'm complaining, I'm being a whiny baby, if you will. So, Flo, thank you so much. I think I'm going to do powders at water changes. Yeah, that's probably one of the easiest ways because you can really target whatever you want. Ken's 3D and Aquatics had to share over the course of 3 weeks of collecting eggs. I hatched and now have 80-ish Cali Tawa rainbows. Also received my pin. Thank you. You're welcome. I'm glad you got it, Ken. I hope everybody got theirs now because they've all been shipped out with enough time that they should have all arrived. In theory, should have been there faster than I got my Matin filter from a certain company that does a lot of shrimp. But it got here, so that's what matters. It just took longer than I thought it was going to. And if, I like to complain. All right. Aquatic Moose. Have you ever heard of anyone spawning panda loaches? I have not. I don't know if anyone... I'm sure somebody has to have captive bred them at some point. But I'm not sure. I don't know of anyone off the top of my head that has. Yeah, I ordered it from Flip because I wanted to support Rob's business. I think they just had a particularly busy week plus bad weather all over the place that delayed mine getting shipped out. I'm not that stressed about it. I'm being melodramatic. It got here. That's what matters. It just took slightly longer than I thought, so I had to kind of adjust my filming and editing schedule because I didn't have it when I needed it to film. So it was like, I guess we're talking about this other thing first. Whatever. It's a very first world problem. Only way. Pick 5 rainbow species for a mixed rainbow display tank of 150 gallons. Mmm. Mmm. Okay, okay. I can do this. Pick 5 species. Man, that's tough. So normally, I like single species. We're going to keep this out. Even 150 gallons, I might only do 2. But for you, I will give you the whole kit caboodle. Are you trying to go somewhere, puppy? I'm sorry. Was my leg in the way? How dare I? Number 1, I'm going to keep this entire tank at about 76 degrees. Dead on. I don't want to go too hot. I want to keep it cool. Why? Because hotter limits a couple of the ones I could use. So, here's the first one. I'm a sucker for blue fish. I'm putting turquoise rainbows in there. Part of this is because both the male and the female have really, really good color. Right? They both have very solid color. So you get both pretty males and pretty females. Plus, they're going to look different from every other fish in the tank. And to me, that's important. Number 2, my red fish. Because I'm gonna mix our colors up here. I'm going to pick different fish for colors. In this case, I want the Glossolepis pseudo-incisus, the Millennium Red Rainbow. Brilliant red color on the boys. They get big, they get chunky. But on the girls, I get this cool, like, brassy gold color. And a lot of people don't like the females in a lot of the Glossolepis. I love the Glossolepis, both incisus and pseudo-incisus females, because that brassy gold color looks really cool when you have all these super colorful rainbows whipping around to have something that's more metallic. For me, that's a big plus. Now, the alternative would be to use a green fish if you don't necessarily, maybe you want a lot of red plants and you don't necessarily want a red fish because they won't pop as much, then you could go with the emerald rainbow, the Glossolepis wanamensis. And the big difference there is the males are big and green, and the females, instead of getting that kind of brassy gold color, get this cool, like, greenish silver color, which is really, really pretty. I think the females, actually, for the wanamensis are very pretty fish. But those are my options. So it'd be either of those two, not both. Only one of the two. So I've got blue, I've got red or green. In my case, red. Next, I want a little bit of yellow. And in this case, being a bit of a snob, fully admit this, I'm going to go for something a little hard to get, but has some good yellow to it. Not impossible to get. Not impossible. I want Melanitania bowmani, aka Ron Bowman's fish. Beautiful, kind of looks like a mostly yellow version of a bozemanii. So it's all yellow, because they're kind of like female bozemanii, where it's lots of yellow on the body. The difference is both the males and the females have color, and they have these awesome, like, red pinstripes between their scales going up their body. And when they get to full adult size and color, those pinstripes don't really show super well on camera, but to us in person, they just light up. They're incredible. They light way the heck up. Now, I got yellow, I got blue, I got red. We're going strong, right? This is where I want to throw a little bit of curveball in there. Something a little different. Normally, I would look for like a kind of orangish fish, because that orange stands out. But instead, I'm going to go for kind of a mauve fish. And that's mostly because this fish is kind of unique. Okay? Oh, hold on. Gotta do myself a favor here. Because my brain is being dumb. There we go. I was about to say the name wrong because my brain went out the window for a half second. Melanitania classioensis. Spelled a K. K-L-A-S-I-O. Much harder to find fish, admittedly, but findable. has a really cool orangish mauve kind of color. So a little more muddy than like a bright orange like you would see in a bozemanii. But this is a fish that has a cool story. It comes from basically only one place in the world. There's only like about 100 yards or something like that of area that's actually exposed to the surface. The rest of the water of this system is completely underground, and it's in that very limited area where this rainbow fish exists. And that makes it kind of interesting and cool. And most likely at this point, they no longer exist in their natural habitat. Because the last time that they were found, they were in like a ditch basically nearby and not in the actual water system itself. So kind of a fun fish. So it gives us 4. Got a kind of there's a color called mauve. Yeah, it's spelled like this. That's the Clausioensis, Johnny. Here. Montania Clausioensis. Bon. That one right there. Thank you, Only Way. Now, my last one. I need something a little bit of a stunner, if you will. A little bit of the take home. The thing that's gonna kind of pop up, be special, be interesting. And for that, I'm going to go with that multicolor. It's not going to be a bozemanii. I don't know what you're thinking. Bentley, you're a bozemanii psychopath. So if it's not bozemanii, it's got to be Running River because it's the one you never shut up about. It's neither of those. Let me explain why. There's a fish that has a nickname from my mentor, and I think it's accurate because when they light up, it's party time. That's the Chilatharina blaharii. That fish, green in the back body, so I'm getting that green color. I've got to find a way to get that extra color. But then this kind of like almost peachy color up front. Very different color and everything else. So now I've got a nice mixture of different colors all over the place. I got a couple rarer fish. I got a couple common fish. I'm going to pronounce it mauve. I don't care. I never said I was good at English. It's just an assumption that I vaguely speak it correctly. Anyway, that would be my last one. The party animal. Why? One, when they light up, it's so fantastic. Now, their females look a little boring, admittedly. But the females do get a little bit of color, so you will be able to differentiate them. It just takes a long time for that color to come in. But you get this cool kind of like green in the back, peach up front color tone thing going on. They're very active. They get kind of big. They get a lot of sass in them. Really, really great fish. What would it take to make party animal the official common name for the Chilatharina blaharii? Enough of us nonstop calling it that. I'm trolling, you pronounced it correctly? All right, well then fine. You can go with your mauve and your chartreuse. Occasionally I know colors and occasionally I don't, and I don't care either way. Greg Jones, pick mine, pick mine. I'm assuming you mean for convention. Do you watch the replay? I got it. It's a deterministic factor, not necessarily the specific convention I'm going to, but like how to pick a convention for anyone. All right, we're basically at time, but there you go. There's your 5. So you've got the classic, the Melitania lacustris, the turquoise rainbow. Then we're going into the Glossolepis pseudoincisis, a little bit newer version of the red rainbow, the Millennium red rainbow. I like the flatter color that the males have compared to the slightly metallic thing that's going on with the irregular incisus. Number 3, the Bowmanii. Little uncommon. Nice yellow color with bright red pinstripes. Both males and females get nice color to them. Kind of like the turquoise. Gets me some offsetting colors. Has a little fun. Go for that special fish. The little different one. Kind of a rare color. That's that rainbow fish nerd kind of rainbow. The Clausioensis. And then finally, we finished up with the party animal. Because if we're going to have a big mix tank, we're going to have a party, we got to have the party animal in there. All right? That's a requirement. Got to have it. Got to do it. Alyssa, I've heard mauve bounce so many ways. Feel free to pronounce it however you want. I appreciate you. Make up a champ. I have a few of your guppies with perfect tails and a few that just always seem to be in bad shape. Should I move a few males in a hospital tank? It doesn't seem like fin rot. I will say this. I know that in my experience, I've had many males that are pretty susceptible to flow, basically like causing breakage in their fins. A little bit of salt helps heal them up. I've not hospital tanked any of mine, but I will be going through kind of soonish and like splitting my best males, if you will, away along with my best females to kind of, I don't want to say like line breed because they're already a line, but kind of like make a hand selected version that I'll make the ones are the only ones that go to redfish, bluefish. Um, I normally do that. I spend a lot of time like trying to fish them out of my colony as is, but I'll probably just take a more active approach as opposed to having my big colony running, just to get the best of the best, so to speak, so that when I do make them available through Jason, that you know you're getting like literally the best ones out of my colony. So yeah. Okay. How the heck did one fish get called Millennium, but the other fish doesn't even have a common name? Welcome to rainbow fish. The problem is there's tons of them that aren't even scientifically described yet. There's just so many that some have common names, some have terrible common names. Like we'll call they will call the parva the sunset rainbow or the like dwarf orange rainbow. There's a lot of bad names out there, uh, and I don't get it. Yeah. All right, last question I'm going to ask. I'm a Cup fan. How can we make a mob of autos happen, like 40 plus? Is that possible? Interesting to see them show like that. So I do know that Corvus Oskin, my buddy Joel, at one point had a tank where he was basically breeding, colony kind of breeding, in a massive tank, autosynclus at one point. And his like trick to helping them do well was he in his sump, he would rotate things in and out of his sump, and his light for his sump was on 24 hours a day at maximum brightness, just blasting it to help generate small surface algae, little bits of diatoms, and extra biofilm. And you just rotate him in and out of the tank to help feed his colony of autosynclus. In theory, you could do it, but you would really want. That's where you'd start looking at like your higher water flow kind of tanks and doing stuff like that. It's got to be a way, though, right? Got to be a way. Hurt you skipped my question. How dare you? I answer tons of your questions, Leo. Get out of here. This guy, the greatest abuser of the Bentley bat phone known to man. I'm playing though, Leo. It's so funny. All right, gang. It is time. Uh oh. Uh oh. Never mind. We gotta go to this one comment. Poor Stephen P. How dare you, sir? Remembers that time Bentley talked me out of Blaharii. Rightfully so. They need a big tank. They do. They want a long tank. They need room. But we're talking about a 150-gallon tank. That's going to have some room, right? You can do Blaharii in that big boy. You can't do it in like a 40-gallon breeder. That ain't going to work. They get too big too fast. You need at least like 75 for them. But when you do get them going, ooh, they're nice. Anyway, gang, I want to thank you all so much for being here on this off the rails random Tuesday, like every Tuesday that we stream together, right? They're always a little just off in left field, but I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your week. I'll see you next week, and as always, thank you so much for watching, and stay awesome. It's true, though, the party animals are really good. It's really good.